The major characteristic of this age will be self-love. In other words, the major issue, if you see what is driving human behavior at the moment, is self, the love for self. And this is deeply embedded in current philosophy. The philosophy of this age is basically founded on the necessity to care for oneself. So if you ask anybody, why are you doing what you are doing? He will say, well, that's what I like to do. Why do you choose this job? Well, that's what I love to do. That's a job I love to do. Why are you eating this type of food? Oh, that's the type of food I love to eat. Why are you wearing this type of clothes? Well, that's what I love to wear. So the philosophy is self-based. It is rooted in the thought that there is no God. In effect, therefore, each person is God unto himself or herself. So what we are talking about is that the way people live today is completely based not on what God wants, not on what God directs or what God says, but on how we feel. A typical example to illustrate this would be this issue on homosexuality and same-sex marriage, which certain churches have now adopted. It's not just a social pressure from society, but even the church has adopted it. And the interesting thing is that the churches that have adopted it are not as much interested in what God is saying. Their interest is not what did God say about this, as much as they're interested in what did society say about this. All right. So what society says about it has become the guide of people who be. And checking on to what self is saying about sexual preference, they say, well, it depends on how. If you are, but you are feeling like a female, you are quite welcome to change and become female. What does God? No, nobody cares. That doesn't come into the equation. It's me, myself, and what I feel. All right. We're here to enjoy. That is the basis of all this thinking. That we are here on earth to enjoy life, and what I can make of it will determine how I live in it, not what anybody else thinks or what anybody else can make of it. In whatever way we are able to exploit others in order to gain happiness for ourselves, we should do so without any qualms, because life is short and in any case, very finite. So that's how people think. That is what is driving human behavior at this time. So in order to maximize self-satisfaction, which is our basic quest to satisfy ourselves, we need to have material possessions, right? So if you don't have material possessions, then how can you maximize your self-satisfaction? These will meet our needs. These are materials will meet our needs and satisfy our cravings. They will also put us above our neighbors, enabling us to win the eternal battle of one-upmanship. I'm mentioning two things here. One is self-satisfaction, and the other is how others see us. Do others see us as being self-satisfied? So it's not just that I'm satisfied, but I must also be as being satisfied. That is what brings people contentment. This issue of one-upmanship or seeing how people see us is based on the fact that I'm satisfied when I own things. The more things I own, the more I'm satisfied. As much as possible, I should own more things than anyone I know. So if I own more things than anyone I know, then it makes me the happiest person around. Once I see somebody who owns more than I do, I would like to out-own him. And so the whole of life is a struggle, a strive to own more and more so that I can be better and better than other people, or at least thought of as being better by other people, so that I will have the satisfaction of thinking I'm the best person around. To own things, I need money. Therefore, the love for things can be translated into the love for money. So you can see where Paul started from. He says, in the last days, men shall be lovers of self. And that's what we have been considering all along. But then, secondly, he says they will be lovers of money. You can now see how loving money ties into loving self. Without money, you can't have materials. Without materials, you can't have your needs met and your cravings satisfied. Even then, you will not have enough to satisfy your feeling that you are better off than others around you, uh, and that your struggle is still to get better and better than others. So love of self translates to love of money. Then Paul goes into boastfulness, pride, and abusiveness. These three go together. There is no point for me to have possessions if others are not aware that I own them. Indeed, the real game is to let others see and know that I'm better off than them, right? So, therefore, now that I own things, to that extent will I publicize my ownership of them so that people will realize that I'm extremely important. In other words, uh, if I own something, I want to show it off. I want people to see it. Uh, can you imagine somebody owning one of the flashiest cars in town and he just locks it up in the garage? He doesn't let anybody see it at all. No, the idea, the purpose of owning it is so that people will see it. And the reason you want people to see it is so they can see that you are very, very important, and that brings you that self-satisfaction that we were talking about. In that process, I must boastfully make a public display of what I own in order to gain satisfaction. My satisfaction doesn't just come from my owning it. My satisfaction comes from people seeing that I own it, and then they begin to praise me for it. So my showing it off is that boastfulness that Paul was talking about. When people notice and acknowledge that I am indeed important because of what I own, then I become puffed off with pride. That is how pride comes in. So men shall be lovers of self, lovers of money. The whole thing is about loving self. But you see, you need money to massage that self, all right? And then when you have money, you show it off. You use it to buy materials and you show off these materials, be boastful. And then when others acknowledge that yes, you actually own them, you actually have them, that brings in that pride, you know. And for those who do not acknowledge that you have them, or they flout their own and make it appear as if they have more than you, you want to dispute this. I have to talk them down in order to show that I'm still more important than they are. And so I become abusive in the process. So you can see how these whole things tie together that Paul is talking about here. Then disobedience to parents. And as I mentioned here, for that matter, anyone in a position of authority, that is also very, very vital. Uh, Indirectly, this was introduced through the ongoing educational philosophy. The whole idea is to push the scientific method, the scientific approach, the issue of inquiry, inquisitiveness, asking questions, never accepting anything as given, but you must ask questions in order to find out what is really true. In other words, you discover for yourself. That's how children are trained. That's how educational process runs. And in the process, we begin to question authority figures. And of course, the first authority figure you come across is your parents. The result of this way of thinking, everything, control included. So when parents begin to manifest their sign to control, to tell children what to do, the issue now is children begin to question it. Uh, so that's the characteristic of this age. It has never been part of any past age uh, that children don't listen to parents or don't obey their parents. It's one of these modern uh, signs of the age. Then ungratefulness, ingratitude, unholiness, lovelessness, vindictiveness, and slanderousness. All these go together. How do they relate to what we have been talking about before? You see, the issue of the inquiry method, science, science became the very basis why man has rejected God. It is science that teaches us that uh, the whole idea of God is fable, that is just a human invention to put authority over us. And so when you become scientifically inclined in life, in other words, when you must prove any and everything before you accept, when you reject the possibility of there being revelation, for example, when you reject revelation or anything that is given as given, anything that you cannot prove scientifically. When you begin to reject things like that, then that becomes your basis for rejecting authority. All right. And no matter what one's parents, government, employer, or any authority figure does for one, anything they do is seen as our right. So whatever government does for us, that's our right. There is a sense of entitlement that has entered humanity, and the result of that is uh, ingratitude. All right. One owes nothing to anyone, but everyone owes everything to one. The government owes me everything. My parents owe me everything. My employer owes me everything. All right. For the same reason, there is no given in behavior. This same sense of entitlement leads to the idea or notion that no one can tell me what to do. You can't tell me that this is the way we do it. Therefore, one is free to behave in any way that he or she feels they like, or they enjoy, or brings him satisfaction, or brings him peace. That leads to unholiness. All right. That's what makes for unholiness. Uh, and then the entire whole business of self-centeredness promotes lovelessness, because it is me, and it's for me, and it's for myself. And every relationship I have with people therefore becomes, how can I use that relationship to my own self-advantage? Life is not based on what can I do to be a blessing to people. What can I do to promote the welfare of others, which is what love is. So lovelessness becomes a characteristic of this age. Vindictiveness comes in uh, when one possesses such an attitude. They find it difficult to forgive offense. Why? Because you are there to serve me. You are there to meet my needs. How dare you not do it? So I become vindictive, you know. So that's the relationship between what Paul lists here as the characteristic of the age. And my take is that no other age you can have bits and pieces of these characteristics in different ages, but no other age has packaged them all together the same way that we have today in the current age. Uh, the fulfillment of this uh, 2 Timothy chapter 3 in our age is unique for all time, and is one of the indicators of the fact that we are actually living in those perilous days. Why does he call them perilous days? They are perilous for the believer because of what Jesus said in Matthew 24, that because iniquity shall abound. And that's what this scripture is introducing, the abounding of iniquity. That's what 2 Timothy 3 is talking about, the abounding of iniquity. Because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. So the effect or the impact of this general societal behavioral pattern on the Christian is that it makes the Christian lose his capacity to love, his capacity or ability to care for others and the well-being of others. Self-control is another thing Paul talks about there. He says, men will lose self-control. Self-control speaks of limits and constraints, all right? And in these days, self-control, limits, constraints are jettisoned. Whether you're thinking about how people dress, or you're thinking about how they eat, or what they drink, or what they smoke, self-control is thrown away. The major thing is, do I like it? Does it bring me satisfaction? Does it bring me contentment? Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. It doesn't even matter. Because there's no standard, there can be no self-control. All right. That is seen as a negative contributor to one's quest for self-satisfaction. Unbridled enjoyment is a goal of self-satisfaction. That is what one must seek by all means. So the more satisfaction you seek, the more you put away any type of restraint or control in your behavior. So anything goes. About the only limit to behavior these days is long as nobody else is hurt. So as much as possible, if nobody else complains of being hurt, then I'm free to do just about anything I like. Dress anyhow I like, walk any way I like, say whatever I like, as long as nobody else complains. All right. Brutality is another thing that Paul says will be a mark of this age. He says they'll be brutal. And nothing else paints the picture of this way of human behavior these days as much as abortion, the killing of innocent babies in the womb does. Is a height of human brutality. All right. If you kill somebody who is grown up, at least he has a chance to fight back, or at least to protect himself, to seek to protect himself. When you kill a child that is in the womb, that is the height of human brutality. And it's now become a fundamental right all over the world, virtually all over the world. You can abort any baby, and the ages at which you can do this abortion is going up and up and up. All right. Last time I was talking about the doctor who said that he's a gynecologist. So he said on the same day he can actually be in a theater helping to performing an abortion for somebody who is 23 weeks pregnant. All right. And then on the same day, he will leave that operation and walk into the next theater and begin to help a woman deliver who is giving birth to a premature baby of 23 weeks old. And he said he would do it with the same zeal. You know, why? They asked him, they said, why? Why would you do it with the same zeal? He said, because it depends on the parents. If the woman wants the baby, then I'll work to give her the baby. If the woman does not want the baby, then I'll work to kill the baby. Like I said, it's a height of human brutality. And there is no other age that has not only practiced this, but has done so legally. In other words, legalized this, made it acceptable in society as much as the day that we're in today. And as I believe that it will not be too long before we begin to see uh, them say that, well, even at the full term, when the child is about to be born, you can kill the child. In fact, it will soon get to the stage where even after the baby is delivered, if the mother doesn't like it, they can kill the child before they hand them over to the baby. It's getting to that point where humanity's brutality has gotten to a very high pitch, right? It says they are not going to be lovers of good. To love good is to adhere to a given standard. All right. So you to say you love good, it means that there's even a definition of the good. In this day and age, there is no definition. If you say this is good, they say by whose standard? Who says? Who defined it? If it's good for you, it's not good for me. So, all right. So adherence to standards is looked at as quaint Victorianism. You know, in the modern age, one is the determinant of what is good, which is always what equals to his self-pleasure. What pleases me is a height of what I can do. In relationship with others, one can be treacherous, right? You can be rash, and certainly you can be conceited. No problem. Without these qualities, others may take advantage of one in the rat race to prove that one is the very best. Without this, one would risk the lack of satisfaction. So treachery is allowed if that's going to make me successful. I can be rash if that's what's going to make me make it. Uh, and when I do make it, of course, I'm allowed to take pride in what I've achieved and be conceited, you know. Right. So that these are the situations that we face in the world, but even in religion, in religious circles, I am what counts. If you look at the prayer list of many believers, where they keep prayer lists, you find that most of the prayer requests relate to me, myself, and my own, what I want and what I need and what those around me need. Our prayers are hardly ever for other people. So what am I saying? I'm saying this behavior pattern that is described as perilous has permeated the church. That is what Jesus was talking about. As a result of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many is becoming cold. Christianity is being reinterpreted to mean what I need, what I must have, not God needs or what God wants, not what my neighbor needs or not what my neighbor wants. It's I am at the center. Being pleased must be the reason for all that I do. All right. So why am I doing this? Well, because I like it. Why did you choose that? Oh, because I enjoy it. Why did this person you want to marry? Because I like him. We never say what God said or how that fit into what you are doing. Does it fit into what you do? No. I like the shape of her nose, please. So it's my pleasure at the center of Christianity. everything. As far as I'm concerned, God is there to I'm not God. So Christianity is reinterpreted to be what I can use to how I can use God better to serve me. And I'm telling you this because this is the center. The whole thing is based on what society is doing, what society is saying. The iniquity is abounding in society. And like Jesus predicted, is affecting the church. Is making Christians redefine Christianity. It's making Christians now say that the basis of Christianity is for God to meet my need. The basis of Christianity is for God to serve me. So Christianity is now, I learn a system through which I can God better serve me. How I can make my brethren because the end is at hand. The judge, the person who is to judge our behavior, who is coming to judge intention, who is coming to judge even our so-called achievement in Christianity, coming the time and see, is it the God type of Christianity? Is it the God serving type of Christianity? Or is it the me serving type of Christianity? That's why the Lord said that when he comes, there will be a judgment. And in that Thessalonian passage where it talks about, Corinthian passage where it talks about the fact that when it comes, everything will be judged as by fire and will be saved as though through fire. How would they be saved as though through fire? Because they had misinterpreted Christianity. In fact, for some, they may not even make it because the whole basis of their Christian life is how to use God better to meet their own needs. Whereas the Bible tells us that the whole purpose of Christianity ought to be to love God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. May God help us to understand. So one does not have to look far to see that these are the characteristics of the age in which we live, that what Paul is describing as perilous, what Jesus is describing as iniquity abounding, are the characteristics of the age that we live in right now. Ease, pleasure, satisfaction are the marks after which every society runs, including Christians. You know, uh, not only do we want to get satisfaction, we want it incremental. We want it to increase with the passage of time. You know, a 1% drop in the standard of living is considered to be intolerable. I mean, look at the effect of the current pandemic on the economy of the world, and people are already complaining. Standards are falling. We are no longer making the progress we planned to make. The set goal for the year cannot be met, and it's been as intolerable. Why? Because that's it's not just enough to get something now. Is that you want more next time, you want more next year, you want more, and that becomes the purpose of living for many. This situation has led to the canonization of greed. So it's not just that greed has become acceptable, it is now made a saint. It's now the right thing to do. Not just acceptable, it is a correct way to live, is to be greedy, to want more and more and more. Not just as an individual, but for the society as a whole, for the country as a whole. All right. talk, this has favored the credit economy for the nation. Every is expected to operate a foundation of debt. Because I can't afford it, I'm encouraged to borrow, right? To borrow and live society. Nations under that, all right? Whole nations base their income on, their annual budget on a deficit, right? It's accepted, it's the norm. Borrow now and live better, today. Why? Because you must be better today than yesterday. Well, why should that remain the same? Why should it be stagnant or even fall a little bit? Why? So even if it means borrowing, well, then let's go for it. In fact, that's how the whole society is now built on. With this pandemic, for instance, governments, even governments that used to be prudent in managing economies, are now throwing caution to the winds, and all they want to do is win the next election. And how do you win the next election? Is to ensure that the people think you are making things better and better every year. So borrow more and more and more in order to massage their feeling for greed. So these are what I have called the social signs. These are the signs that mark the society, uh, our behavior, what is at the root of it, what is at the base of it, self, and how does it work out in relationship to other people. It's lovelessness, all right? So it's self, love, and no love for other people. That's the basis of the characteristic of the age. And I'm saying that this set of characteristics, uh, which Paul says are the marks of the end time. He says, mark this, in the end times, perilous times will arise. And he gives this set of characteristics. I said it fits our age as it has done no other age since the time Paul wrote that. So it's very clear that Paul was describing the age in which we now live. All right. So what are the ones I've called the political signs? As I said before, they relate more to the environment. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 7, Jesus began to give a list of uh, events, if you like, that will characterize the end times. We've just examined those that Paul gave. Let's look at the ones that Jesus mentions. It talks about earthquakes, which we can link with tsunamis, global warming. It talks about droughts and famines. Uh, can talk about tornadoes and cyclones and all these events that seem to have come to a head in our time. And you can add to that what he talks about in Luke chapter 21 about pestilences as marks of what he called the beginning of birth pangs. The beginning of birth pangs. So when we see these social signs that we just examined taking place, and then we examine the events in our environment, and they all seem to be tallying. These pestilences relate to issues like the pandemic we're now experiencing through COVID-19. And the issue is, how do these prepare the ground politically for the Antichrist to come, and therefore for Jesus to return? These are the issues we want to discuss very quickly. One of the impacts it has on society is the fact that we are a little confused now about how to manage our economic system. At the end of the or after the First World War and towards the Second World War, philosophies began to emerge about how to organize human society, uh, that eventually culminated in the communist philosophies. We know that later on in the 80s, communism has become discredited as a viable system, so that even in China, where it is being practiced now, and even in Cuba, where it's still being practiced, uh, communism has had to be colored by capitalist practices in order for the economies of those nations to continue to move on. So communism has failed because it was very, very promising at the time. There was a time when it was thought, oh, finally, we have found a system that will solve humanity's problem. That's failed. Even capitalism, that seems to be primordial, seems to be how human beings have always done it, is tottering because even here in Europe, every year there are always demonstrations against capitalism, as a system of government. And the big issue is, so how do you reorganize the philosophy of capitalism in order to make it more acceptable in a time like this? When we're talking about this, these are the things that they take, for instance, global warming, which is a major issue today. Global warming, climate change. That's what has brought the big debate up. In fact, but for this coronavirus, that was the main issue of discussion until very recently. And I'm sure that as soon as coronavirus goes away, obviously we'll come back to global warming as a major issue. And what is being said is that there's a need to change the system of organizing the economy so that it can better take care of these issues that are arising. All right. So, for example, COVID-19. All right. People are saying, had it been that there was a unified system of government which can address this problem not only at the national level, but at the international level, we would have been able to nip this thing in the bud while it was still coming. That what led to its spread is the fact that, for example, uh, uh, it was initially treated as a Chinese problem, you see, and the Americans were not prepared. But if there was a one government, for example, managing the whole planet, then once such a thing begins to happen in China, that government will recognize that it's its responsibility to stop it, to nip it in the bud before it's countries, you see. So the issue is this the events, take coronavirus, for example, happening, global warming, for another example. The events happening around us is making us very distrustful of the systems we have set up, political systems we have set up. And the idea now is we must find a new way of managing society so that the problems can be resolved. There are, and so this becomes an intolerable or intractable problem. Intractable because it cannot be easily solved. But this is not the only intractable problem. There are other intractable problems that face us internationally. Let me just quickly run through a few of them. Security problems and the emergence of strategic issues such as nuclear proliferation. So let's take strategic issues. The problem between America, it used to be America versus Russia. Now it's becoming more and more America versus China. That's on the one hand. Then the issue of Islam versus the West, you know, if you like, or even versus the rest of humanity, because the whole idea of the the people we call Islamic extremists, is that Islam is the best way to organize human society, you know. So that's one security issue. Then this nuclear proliferation issue, how it is that some countries have enough power right now through their nuclear weapons to wipe out the whole world if they so choose to do. All right. So these are problems facing the world. All right. Intractable. Then one major one is the Palestinian problem, particularly now that the issue of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount are coming to the fore. Just recently, Prime Minister Netanyahu began to talk about annexing the West Bank, the whole of the West Bank, uh, so that that will become part of the Jewish state, so that Israel will go from the Mediterranean all the way to the River Jordan, as it used to be in the Old Testament days. And in the process, the main issue now is becoming, what about the ownership of Jerusalem? Who owns Jerusalem? Whose capital is it? Is it the capital of the Jews? The Israelis are claiming it as their capital. The Palestinians are claiming it as their capital, the same city. Particularly now, who owns the Temple Mount? All right. Is it the Muslims who own the mosque that is there right now, or the dome of the Golden Dome Mosque, or is it, or what they call the Dome of the Rock Mosque, or is it the Jews whose temple was there originally? And so that becomes a very, very intractable problem facing the world right now. So how do you solve these problems? All right, that brings us, or in fact, it's not that it brings us, it has brought us already to the United Nations as a system of resolving international conflicts. All right, and so after the Second World War, the United Nations was created to take over from the League of Nations, hoping that as a result of the creation of the Security Council, it will be possible for this body, this umbrella body, to resolve this kind of intractable international issues. So whether you are talking about the physical phenomena that arise as a result of the earthquakes, the tsunamis, or the global warming, or the even the issue of the pandemic. The question is, how do you resolve them? Who resolves them? Who is there to resolve them? The United Nations clearly is proving to be incapable of being a forum that can resolve that kind of issue. This need will then lead to the emergence of a single person rule. In 1 John 2:18, he is described as the Antichrist. In fact, that passage says many Antichrists have already come. All right. So, who is this one person? We'll come to that later on to discuss who is this person? How is he going to emerge? But what I'm trying to show you is that the trends happening today are all leading towards the emergence of this one centralized government, probably led by one person, who will have authority to take decisions. You see, the social science we have examined have been based on the fact that there is no God. So God is out of the equation. Out of the equation. Authority figures that are traditional are out of the question. So we have to reorganize our society in such a way, because you see the problems arising are beyond what individual countries can solve on their own individual level. There's got to be a united effort. We have tried the UN, even with the Security Council. It has not worked. It has not been able to solve these problems. So a more centralized authority is needed in order to solve or resolve these intractable problems that face our world today. David, I don't know whether we can stop it here for today, and then we can press on from there next week. Can we take questions and comments now?